welcome to Film Brokers. This is a podcast where we talk about film and how to break into film and essentially talk to my friends and luminaries and people who have been in the industry for quite a long time. And today we've got Saeed Taji Farouky, who is a friend of mine who is a very good documentary filmmaker, and he has made feature films. He often makes feature films, and one of the main feature films that he might be recognised for is a film called Tell Spring Not to Come this year. He has made a lot of films since that time, but also is about me catching up with him and saying hello. How are you, Saeed?
I'm okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Nice to see you again.
Not bad. Yeah, good to see you again.
Yeah.
After our last... There's a lot of gap in between our last episode and this one.
Into our last foray into
10 years.
Some vague social media aspect.
Yeah.
Or something or other.
Yeah. This one I'm really anticipating will make me famous and rich.
I promised you that last time. Not gonna,
That's very true.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Maybe it has a long tail.
So, how have you been and what have you been up to?
I've been, I would say, pretty exhausted, only because I'm doing my full-time job and a lot of activism at the same time. So it takes up a lot of time and doesn't always leave enough space for my creative work, but I'm doing the best I can to balance them out.
Cool. Activism. Could you tell us a little bit more about what activism you've been doing recently?
Yeah, I mean, I've been working on Palestine, on Gaza in particular, very intensely over the last 2 years, but for obviously 30 years prior to that, I've been doing activism and campaigning on Palestine. But it's just become much more intense now, and also because not only this phase of the genocide is much more intense than it's ever been, but the British government's crackdown on political activism on any kind of dissent is much more intense than it's been, at least in my lifetime. So I feel like we really have to resist before we see a lot of our fundamental rights eroded. And at the same time, I'm trying to integrate that activism and that level of engagement with my work. So my work has kind of taken a slightly different turn in that it's, for me, much more radical now. It has to be much more radical.
Okay, great. When you say it has to be more radical, is it about informing the stories or the stories you want to tell, or is it literally? I kind of want to understand that last bit of what you just said. I
think it's both. I think it's partly how it informs what I focus on in my stories. So, to be honest, when the Brexit vote came through here, my producer, who's from Malta originally, and then me, who obviously I have an international family, many of them live in the rest of Europe, we both felt like shit. Can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. And we both agreed anyway that going forward from that point, all our work would be political. Okay, and as in, explicitly about political issues.
This is your producer, is it?
This is my producer and I, yeah, or the producer I work with. I don't like to say my producer. Now with, since October of 2023, I've become even more focused, and at least for now, all the work I do is about Palestine and about the liberation of Palestine and building towards the liberation of Palestine. So yes, partly it's about the subject of the films, but it's also about the way I work, right? It's about who I take funding from, it's where the work is shown. It's also an entire political approach to how the crew works together, issues of equality, issues of justice within the workings of our crew, and then trying to apply that to the film industry in general. And those films, because a lot of my activism, because I'm a filmmaker and a teacher, a lot of it is in the cultural sphere. So it's challenging an institution that doesn't make a statement, for example. It's challenging festivals that are showing Israeli propaganda, this kind of thing. But that becomes part of the filmmaking, because the message and the direction and the focus of everything you're doing is justice and liberation.
Is there anything in particular that you're working on right now that you're able to talk about?
Yeah, I'm working on, somehow 3 films came together at the same time. So I'm working on 3 films at the same time, which I don't normally do. But one of them is a feature fiction. So I've started, although most of my work is documentary, I've started making fiction. And it's about Gaza, but it's not about this phase of the genocide. We started writing it in 2022, and it takes place anyway around 2017. It's about a man. It's really about grief in general. It's about grief, but specifically through the life of a man in Gaza who, very basic premise of the film is that he rescues a peregrine falcon that's migrating across his land, and he starts to believe it's the reincarnation of his sister. So it's about grief, the way we deal with grief, but also the way that Palestinians are sort of allowed to grieve or expected to grieve, and how we grieve within such an extreme state of conflict and violence. And it's also about this sense of solidarity amongst Palestinians, a sense of resistance amongst Palestinians. So there are themes that, you know, were relevant 20 years ago and will be relevant 20 years from now, regardless of what happens in the meantime. The other film, so that's a sort of art house, right? Because I'm in a way I'm very split. Half of my heart is this kind of art house world, like expressive, quite slow. The other half is much more angry and militant. So I'm making a documentary. You know, I've been arrested several times from activism and convicted once. So I'm working with other activists who've been arrested and put on trial and convicted. And
under UK law,
this is in the UK, yeah. And building, along with members of the public, a rough recreation of the police interview room and the courtroom. And then the participants, we go through workshops to kind of develop their scenarios, and they do idealized versions of their police interview and their trial. So in other words, they say the thing they couldn't say in reality, but the film becomes the alternate reality in which they are truly free.
This is a narrative construct. Fiction.
Yeah, no, this is a documentary.
This is a documentary, okay, fine.
But within the documentary, there are these
narrative elements, yeah. Okay,
yeah.
cool.
So, I mean, I don't make the distinction between narrative and documentary. A documentary can be narrative, but I mean...
Sorry, I should say scripted, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, so, yeah, exactly. It's a hybrid. It's a hybrid in that sense. So the content clearly is also about resisting political censorship in this country. But even the way it's made is through a collective, through a collaborative process. Also collaborative process with members of the public, because we shot in public, people can come and watch. People built the set with us, members of the public. So all these activities also help strengthen the networks of solidarity. They help teach people how you can be active in particular ways. Then when we show it, that becomes an extension of the activism, because you show it in spaces where people can learn also from strategies of organizing. So you see what I mean? It becomes the political becomes part of the entire process.
And that's your second film?
Yeah.
Right, and you had a third film, you said?
The third film, so because the first film was taking a very long time to finance, I got very frustrated. And I had been reading a lot about Hong Sang-soo, the Korean filmmaker, who does, 2 or 3 films a year, minuscule budgets, more or less films and edits within about a week. I couldn't exactly achieve his speed, but I wanted to do something similar. So I came up with a very basic premise. With my own money, shot it in Cairo with mostly non-actors. Very quickly, we shot the whole feature in 6 days, but very well planned, very efficiently planned. And then now we're editing that.
That's a feature?
Yeah,
right, okay.
Feature fiction again.
Blimey.
So again, I just wanted to make it very, very quickly. And that is somewhere in, it's of course also political, but it's still a sort of, I would say, in the art house world. It's as political as we could be in Egypt, where it's also a fascist dictatorship where, you can't make films freely in Egypt.
Busy much?
Well, yes, too much.
Yeah.
I didn't intend for all these 3 to happen at the same time.
Are you getting time to breathe?
Not really.
Eat food?
Necessary.
Swimming?
No, but I do run and climb.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
You need that.
Yeah, climbing for me is an amazing exercise / distraction.
I never thought I could do it because 1, I'm scared of heights, and 2, just too fat.
No, listen, I mean, I'm not going to comment on your body shape,
Well,
but there are people of all sizes.
really?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Fat boys are going up the climbing wall, are they?
Yeah, it's not, yeah, no, there are people of all sizes.
And they're managing to get up the wall.
Yeah.
I'm being very fattest at the moment, aren't I?
Yeah, it's not about strength or size.
Yeah. Going back to your work, that's a lot of stuff you're doing anyway.
Yeah.
And I was looking into your work. I was obviously I know The Runner and Tell Spring Not to Come this year, but I also have noticed that you've obviously done quite a lot of films since then.
Yeah.
So when was Tell Spring Not to Come this year? When was that actually?
It came out in 2015.
2015. So it's been 10 years.
Yeah.
And I would say, when you mentioned earlier about Brexit being quite a significant turning point, I agree with you completely. I think Brexit for me was the day things changed completely for the UK for the foreseeable. And you know, your identity is you're half Egyptian, half Palestinian.
Yeah.
But born in Britain.
Yeah.
So in terms of that question, so do you consider yourself a British filmmaker, or with the heritage of your parents, or would you say that you're more aligned to where your parents are from, and would call yourself an Egyptian or a Palestinian filmmaker?
That's a very good question. And I think in a way it goes to the heart of it goes to the heart of identity in this country, but also how this country looks at culture. I consider myself Palestinian and Egyptian. I know technically I'm British, although it's never really been a huge part of my identity. But whether I'm a British filmmaker, I've never had, except for a sort of subset of public funding on a short fiction film, my feature films have never been supported by any public money in this country. And in fact, any money at all. The only British money I've ever had in a film was a private company that put money into Tell Spring Not to Come this year. And that's not through lack of trying. I for years was applying for documentary fiction financing, this kind of thing. When I realized that wasn't working, I started doing more European co-productions. And so one of the producers I work with is French. So the last film I made was a French production with Swiss, Dutch, and Palestinian co-production. So, technically I am a British filmmaker, but my films they're not by the cultural test considered quote unquote British films. For funding purposes, I'll consider myself a British filmmaker, but I also have a Jordanian passport. So sometimes I'm also a Jordanian filmmaker.
Do you find the current climate of filmmaking and the film industry challenging for a filmmaker of your ilk, knowing that you have such a diverse background? Is it like, say, getting the funding? I assume that you've had a lot of funding, that you've self-funded quite a lot of stuff, and then found the money. But is the current climate conducive to helping emerging filmmakers or filmmakers with different backgrounds, or what would you say about that?
No, not at all. I think it's awful. I think it's awful both for the experimental emerging film and for commercial film. I think this country has really screwed up, and I would say this is about culture in general. I find the landscape here for cultural, the funding of culture, the exhibition, the celebration, the dissemination of culture, extremely depressing. Part of that is financial, and I think for film, I can see a very distinct break when David Cameron in particular made a policy that he wanted the British film industry to be a commercial industry, to be a profit-making industry. And there was an old system that had its issues. It was not perfect, but I still think was producing much more interesting work than what's being produced now. So that break was made, and the entire focus of the industry changed.
Do you think Cameron achieved his dream in a way? Because I can.
Well, yeah, in a way that I think is terrible for filmmaking, even though it's good for the British economy.
Because it becomes more corporate.
because the filmmaking industry ended up relying on inward investment from foreign productions. So one of the benefits, I'll give them credit, is there are some of the best post-production VFX in the world in this country, and studios.
On the generation of jobs.
And crews, crews in those studios. The problem is that entire industry is almost fully dedicated to foreign productions that come, use those facilities, and then leave. So for those private corporations, it's generating a lot of money. And it's an average something like £4.5 billion a year inward investment. So on the balance sheet, it looks great. But none of that money and not much of that skill is contributing to what I would say is a dynamic, thriving film industry in this country that can do both commercial and art house, that's doing experimental, where we're also integrating film into the cultural landscape of the country and influencing the rest of the world. So you don't go to international film festivals these days and see British films winning awards in Cannes, for example. It's very rare. Or British filmmakers who are considered some of the avant-garde or cutting edge or doing really exciting stuff. It doesn't happen anymore because of that.
That's very interesting, because I never thought of it that way. I never thought of it in terms of the festival circuit.
Well, but again, it depends what your priorities are. If you're purely interested in generating profit, then the system they have now is great. And again, on the balance sheet, looks fantastic. If you're interested in encouraging other people to make different kinds of cinema, or if you're interested even in culture as a way of understanding who you are, what your country stands for. And I think this, and that's, I'm not just speaking as some kind of wannabe intellectual or saying something that sounds dreamy. For me, things like Brexit, for me, things like the rise of the far right in this country, racism, xenophobia, those are questions of national identity. Those are questions of how we perceive ourselves as a nation. Those are questions of who we perceive as our fellow citizens. These are all questions that culture deals with, right? That culture tackles, that culture challenges. So much of Britain's perception of itself, now we can argue whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, but it comes from film, it comes from cinema, it comes from our music, our theater, our poetry, right? And then aside from that, you also just have the much more, I guess what I would call spiritual aspect of it, which is how individuals want to express themselves. People need that. People need that on an individual basis, but countries also need that to understand, to be able to openly ask questions about who they are.
I think it's interesting what you're saying, because I feel like while you're talking about that, I keep thinking about a film called Scrapper, which is done by I think it's a working class director. It doesn't really matter about her background, but she is bright British. Young emerging filmmaker, director. And at the same time, you think to yourself, like, as a producer, as a former producer myself, like, who's your audience? Who's the audience you're talking to as such, and who is the audience you need to tell these stories to? But also, where's the pickup? Where's the traction? How does then this emerging filmmaker get popular as such? I think it's a very difficult time right now, and when you're saying that about how the cultural shift has changed since Brexit, I 100% agree. I think it's been, I mean, funny enough, like, just a very, not to dilute the argument, but like yesterday I was watching a little, you're doom scrolling and you go on Instagram, there's Gary Neville from Manchester United Football Club, formerly of Manchester United Football Club, talking about taking a flag down when he saw someone put a flag up. And at the same time he was like, this is not the country that he was proud of when he played for Man United, and the Man United team was made up of Europeans and Africans and people who played for the team, and they were his teammates, and he feels that the country's changed, or is changing, because of the rise of the far right and these political machinations, essentially. But it's sad, isn't it? Because the country I knew when I was growing up, it does seem to be distant from me now, and at the same time, the next steps and the next 2 or 3, 4 years are going to be vital in terms of what the UK itself becomes.
Exactly.
And ultimately the cultural shift that will kind of interpret itself through this medium of film and documentary, and how will we digest our media, how we consistently digest our media through internet and social media, which in a way has its advantages, but there are huge disadvantages about the truth that comes through these platforms, because is it opinion or is it truth?
Sure.
And I think that's the biggest dilemma that we can tend to have. I'm just going to stop us on the political machinations aspect of our conversation, purely because I want to talk about you and your background as well.
Okay.
And I think knowing your background as a filmmaker, really, and what got you into film, like what was your first, I mean, it's going to be kind of very direct, straightforward questions, but if you can kind of maybe just try and...
Not take half an hour.
No. But more just kind of like, I will just ask direct questions, and I would like to hear the answers about the documentary itself and like what inspired you about documentary. I'm gonna lean into that question anyway. Actually, what did you study, and what was the first film that had a significant impact on you growing up?
I mean, the first film, there's two I remember very well. I was probably about 12, 14. One I remember is this French film called Papillon. Have you ever seen this film?
My brother-in-law talks about it all the time.
Really?
Is it? We're not talking.
The original with Steve McQueen and not the Charlie Hunnam remake.
No, definitely not the Charlie Hunnam remake.
Yeah.
When you said the original was Steve McQueen, but you said it was a French film. So was it a French co-production? Because I know it's Dustin Hoffman and Steve McQueen.
It's Dustin Hoffman and Steve McQueen, but it's a French director, so it's a French production.
Okay. Papillon, which is French for butterfly.
It is, yeah, because the main character has a butterfly tattoo, so his nickname is
I've not seen the film.
I think for me, I mean, I had always stayed up late watching TV as a kid, and I was really into horror films. And
Really?
I still love horror films, but also, you know, the Hammer horror films, like they would show them late at night, all the old Draculas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's probably,
Lee.
Definitely. That's probably, you know, that's when I got interested in filmmaking. But when I saw Papillon, and my dad had recorded it for some reason, so it was like on either one or possibly two VHSs, because it was a long film. So it was kind of this thing that I could watch over and over again. And what I think what I found fascinating is that there's a very strong sense of justice in the film. Basically, this guy is in prison for he's innocent. He's wrongly imprisoned. And then he tries to escape. And one of the other characters chooses not to escape at the end of the film, even though he has the opportunity. So it's almost that he had been in prison for so long that became his that became more comfortable to him.
The institutionalization of it, maybe?
Yeah, I would say so. And I remember as a kid just being fascinated by this idea of how you could be suppressed for so long that becomes the status quo. And then you become actually terrified of freedom. So I think as a kid, that idea was, and I couldn't express it as a kid, but I mean, that was very compelling to me. And the other one was The Mission, the Roland Joffe film, which was another film that my dad had recorded, and so I would watch it.
No, the film my brother-in-law says for me to watch, and I've never managed to watch it. It's terrible, isn't it? And one with Robert De Niro.
Yeah, with Robert De Niro.
And he says the soundtrack, Ennio Morricone soundtrack?
Oh, it's a beautiful soundtrack as well.
Yeah.
But the scene, again, I mean, it's this film that has these themes of guilt and redemption that I probably didn't understand as a kid, but now when I think of them, that scene of Robert De Niro carrying, in order to punish himself, he ties this huge bag of armor onto his back and climbs a mountain and refuses to let, I think Jeremy Irons tries to cut it loose at one point and free him, but he refuses and he puts it back on until he makes it to the top of this mountain. So it was like these ideas, again, of redemption, of justice, of guilt and innocence, because that's a film about colonialism, that I know were central to my concept of cinema, even though I couldn't really articulate it when I was young.
Fantastic, great.
What I studied is completely different. I started out studying physics, and I really wanted to do theoretical physics, cosmology. But very early on into that degree, I realized that my math skills were really not good enough. And I was looking around in my physics classes with like other people who were just much better than me at math. And at the same time, because I loved film, I was taking this film course, and the professor was really supportive and very complimentary about my work and saying, this is great what you're making and what you're doing. And the analysis, a lot of it was film analysis. And so pretty much halfway through the first year, I just kind of thought I can either be a mediocre physicist for the rest of my life or a good filmmaker. And that was more important for me. And then I switched my degree. It wasn't film, but it was medium theory, which was kind of theoretical analysis of how we process information across different media.
Considering that, what do you get from film and documentary that you feel... I'm just trying to think about that bridge from you knew you wanted to do physics as such, but what do you get from film? What is the satisfaction that you get as a filmmaker in terms of being able to... Is it the construct? Is it kind of being able to put it together and the satisfaction of getting it out there or such? Because every producer director, for me, I feel wants an audience. But is there something more to it than just having an audience in terms of...
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it's a very profound experience for me. I'm obsessed with cinema, in the making, in the watching, in the exhibition, in everything. I think, for me, it's a way of expressing my doubts, fears, my pain, my sense of love and hate and anger, and the struggle for liberation and the struggle for self-acceptance, and all of these things for me, from the personal to the political, I express through film, and I also understand other people's experiences of those things through watching their films or through making films with them. For me, the making of is as important as the film itself. And in something like militant documentary, which is sort of a very specific subgenre of radical film, the making of is sometimes more important. The process of construction and collaboration is sometimes more important than the final film. So I honestly, for me, it was the way of seeing the world and interacting with the world that I kind of attached to quite young, because I just found that all the other avenues were closed off to me. I'm very political, but I was never interested, for example, in capital P politics. I would never become a politician or, none of that was ever interesting to me, because I just have no faith in that system. I was much more inspired by radical activism.
But as I understand you and know you, from my perspective of you, is you must be wanting to tell people something about the world through your stories.
It's not really tell people, and it's not that there's a message. I've always really resisted this.
Yeah, you don't have to tell people. Maybe tell people a strong thing, but maybe inform people. Maybe leave them open to debate on an argument that you think is important to tell.
Even inform, I would challenge that word, because, I've never, if we talk about Palestine, just for me, that's the kind of foremost issue. I'm not interested in a debate about the genocide in Gaza, right? I'm not interested in the two sides. There are no two sides to a genocide. I think if people, and then my issue with the idea of informing, again, if we talk about Gaza in particular, we're way beyond the point where informing people is going to make a serious change. People know, there's no way that people cannot know what's happening in Gaza now. If they still don't see the inhumanity and the genocide, I have no interest in engaging with those people. So, that's, for me, that's a very, I say this with all respect to your position, it's a very liberal approach. The liberal approach to political cinema has always been, if only people knew, they would change their minds. That's not true. And I think history proves that's not true. And my experience of campaigning also proves that that's not true. Now, I'm not saying there's no value in that kind of long-term educational work. There is. And I also do that. It's not my focus, but I do that. Those things obviously have to run in parallel. But for me, if I had to choose between lobbying politicians and the activism I was involved with, which was direct action against Israeli weapons manufacturers, I would do direct action every time. It's an anarchist approach that doesn't rely on the political structure that already exists, because that political structure has been upholding genocide for 77 years in Palestine and several hundred years under the British Empire.
Okay, back to filmmaking.
Sorry, but this is all. I mean, this is all relevant to filmmaking.
No.
Okay.
I'm not.
Sorry.
I'm not. No. It's more like I'm not trying to separate the arguments. It's more like I'm trying to find the parallels and I'm trying to find the links. Really,
right.
Because I think it's so important. Because I mean, ultimately, what we're trying to do here is kind of inspire people as to these are the reasons people are filmmakers. This is the link where the way you are, your morals and your values are linked to your work, and that's really important. That's an important thing for young people and people to hear anyway.
Right.
I think to inspire future generations of people to become filmmakers. I think that's super important.
I can explain directly the link between political activism and film.
Yeah.
If we talk about militant cinema, the idea of militant cinema.
Yeah, okay.
The original movement of militant cinema in the 60s and 70s was basically a solidarity movement around the world of all people who were fighting for liberation. It included the Palestinians, it included the Algerians, it included the Cubans, it included people in Latin America, Argentina, etc. Essentially, it was called Third Cinema at the time. They did not make a distinction between their filmmaking and their activism, and in some cases, they're fighting as an armed resistance fighter. So there was a group called the Palestine Film Unit. They considered themselves fighters in the Palestinian War of Liberation, but they carried cameras instead of guns. They didn't think of themselves as objective documentary filmmakers, but participants. So for me, this is one way of defining quote unquote militant cinema, where you are part of that process, you're not objectively documenting it. So you would make a film. The goal of that film was to encourage other people to take part in the resistance. We can talk about, for example, in Argentina, the sort of exemplar militant film is called The Hour of the Furnaces. It was about resistance to the dictatorship there. So the film was documenting dictatorship, the resistance to the dictatorship, made illegally, was edited illegally. All of this was illegal. Then the screenings were, of course, also illegal, but you would have other activists there. The film is 3 hours long. They would play the film. Every few moments, they would stop the film and discuss what's happening in the film. And then at the end, people have established new networks of solidarity. They've made new strategies based on what they saw on the screen.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And then they enact those strategies. So that's a perfect example of this concept of militant cinema. And now it still exists on a film. You can watch it on YouTube today. It's a completely different context. But at the time, it was designed to both help people organize, help people strategize.
What year are we talking? When was this?
Hour of the Furnaces is something like 72, maybe,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly.
Okay.
So that's my ideal. Now, obviously, it has to take a different form today. But if you look at the film I was making, we brought activists together. They were making a film, but the film was a byproduct. The important thing was this social process of them sharing their experiences,
And the
coming up with
conversation,
new strategies.
the conversation that would start from that, essentially.
Right.
Which is what art, all good art should do anyway, shouldn't it?
Exactly.
Really? Yeah.
And meeting people from the public who, they may in their minds have an idea of what a criminal looks like. Some of the people that took part served time in prison. Many people have prejudices against what kind of person they're going to meet. And in fact, they were meeting very kind, gentle people who are fighting for the end of the genocide.
Do you... So I'm just looking at my questions.
And then the exhibition is also important, right? Because if you make a film like that, your interest is not, how do I get onto the red carpet at Cannes? It's, can I go to a community center in Leeds where they have a weapons factory and show them this film and inspire them? Can I project it on the side of a prison where 28 people involved in that movement are now serving time?
Considering the current climate, what do you hope could change in the industry? Because obviously, I think you've commented quite a lot on the state of the current industry and the way it is, but what would you want to change or hope to change in the long term?
A lot.
A lot.
I mean, firstly, it needs more funding.
In a nutshell.
So the UK...
Sorry, let's start that again because I was talking over you.
No, it's fine. It needs more funding. That's the most basic thing, right? I mean, this is also an issue. This is a social issue. This country just fundamentally does not respect its own culture, its own cultural industries. So, for example, we have 12. It was just increased now, finally, by something like 20% BFI film funding. But the discretionary film funding in this country is worth £12 million to finance the entire British film industry per year.
That's not a lot.
That's nothing. France, for example, has €800 million fund.
Yeah.
So £12 million, you're talking about a small region in France. So it's not enough.
No.
But this means that everyone involved in the industry also has to push for more financing. The problem is they're too afraid to rock the boat because they don't want to lose their jobs because the industry is so neoliberalized that everyone's jobs are at risk all the time.
And my question in my head is, who are the gatekeepers? Because
Very good question.
Like, if the BFI has £12 million in terms of funding, like you said, people don't lose their jobs.
Yeah.
People at the BBC don't lose their jobs. People at production companies around the country don't lose their jobs because of the climate.
Yeah.
And if the climate's not liberal enough to understand that these stories are very, very, very important to be told, how do you know whether the funding is going to the right places? But also, this is again, it's part of the conversation of trying to inspire younger filmmakers.
Yeah.
Just off the back of that, and obviously because considering our time frame, what would you say young people or people should do to help alleviate the problem? What can they do, in your opinion?
I think, in a way, it depends on how they want to engage with the industry. I mean, I'm at a point where, and you know, I run this radical film school, the majority of people there are at the same point, where we're much more interested in parallel systems than we are engaging with the major institutions. Partly it's out of exhaustion. I mean, I've been trying to make them better for
20 years.
20 years. It hasn't necessarily worked. Maybe they're a little better, but they also have less money than they did. I would say they take less risks than they did, right? So that's not better. So the students in the film school are setting up their own community theaters where they show the work they want to show. They're setting up their own collectives where they pool resources and make films together. So that to me is much more interesting. But there are some people who also want to engage with the industry. Then what I would emphasize is that you have to engage with the industry in a way that you're also going to make it better. You know, I was never interested in being part of the film industry because the industry itself was compelling. It's not at all. I have almost no interest in the film industry itself. You know, I'm obsessed with and in love with cinema. But the industry for me is just a very badly managed way of producing cinema. So if we're going to become filmmakers, we also have to become advocates for a better climate of cinema. That means more funding. That means fighting for that. That means getting back some of the power that film unions had, right? They've been totally defanged over the past 30 years. That means paying for the cinema every once in a while, right? Like, of course, we're all poor and people are struggling and a cinema ticket costs £18.
People stream.
Yeah, which is fine. Everyone's doing it. But also, at some point, you have to go to your local cinema and buy an expensive popcorn because they need the money. It means whatever institutions we're engaging with, though, we also have to tell them it's your responsibility to help support cinema too, right? Like one of the things, just to continue the sort of bitching about the film industry in this country, there are cinemas closing, you know, every few months. It's like a cinema that runs out of money. I remember a few months ago, the Prince Charles.
Just about to say the Prince
which is
Charles
like-
almost went. Yeah,
almost went under, like a landmark fundamental cinema, so central
been there since what,
to
the
the
60s.
film industry,
Yeah.
so central to alternative film programming, so central to bringing old films back, to generating new audiences, everything was going to close.
Always smells like piss around the corner though.
Well, it's in the middle of stuff, but that's one of its charms, right?
That's the one thing.
It's one
Is
of
it
its
charming?
charms, yes.
Or is it just? Come
It's
on,
in the middle of
guys.
Soho.
I mean, anyway, yeah.
And the response of institutions,
Yeah.
including like major funding bodies in this country, was just, and I was looking at it on social media with people saying like, oh, what a shame. Wouldn't it be terrible if it shut down? Please sign this petition. Instead of what they should be doing, which is challenging the government, challenging the landlord who is trying to hike up the prices, leading a campaign themselves, right? Maybe even putting money into it. You know, France, as well as having 800 million euro, also puts a lot of money into subsidizing local cinemas. So
Why are we not doing that?
why are we not doing that? And part of the money, I mean, whatever, we're talking about economic policy here, but like levies, you know, the 4.5 billion that comes in every year from external productions, if you put a tiny levy on that, that's going to put way more money into film industries, and levies on streamers, which Germany's done, France has done, you know, 1-2%, again, forces that money back into the British film industry. We would have a fund probably 2 or 3 times the size it is now, overnight.
Thank you for being on the podcast.
Sure, thanks.
Final question. What do you love about the medium of film or documentary? What do you love about it?
You know, when you're in a theater that has character, one of the great things, okay, I've been bitching a lot about the industry in this country. One of the great things that's very rare, and we should cherish it, is that there are hundreds of music halls in London alone, but you know, many more across the country, that were turned into cinemas and now are absolutely beautiful buildings. Beautiful architecture, beautiful acoustics, everything. When you're in a room like that with history, and you're surrounded by people and the lights go down, there's this magical experience that I don't know how to describe. I think part of it is watching films as a kid and just feeling like this was another world. Another world where all of my struggles and pain was being represented, but also where they could be overcome. You know, another world that's inspiring, that's beautiful, that's somehow maybe even a distraction. And then everyone is sharing this emotional experience, and when it's over, everyone has to figure out how to then melt back into ordinary life. But you turn to the person next to you, who maybe is the friend you came with, maybe not, and you say a few words about the experience. I mean, those to me, you know, that's why I talk about cinema as a social process, because that's something that doesn't just exist spontaneously. It's something that exists because you're all experiencing an artistic creation at the same time. That's extremely valuable in a world that's now so disjointed and so asocial. To still be able to experience that, I think, is phenomenal.
Fantastic, it's a good answer. But I do think you have touched on it. I do think that's true. In less than a minute.
Yeah, right.
What advice would you give young filmmakers to get into the industry?
Oh man,
Be succinct.
I can't. I always struggle with this
I
question.
know.
But I'll tell you why.
Keep it simple.
I always struggle with this question because the circumstances under which I started filmmaking do not exist anymore. When I got my first commission, I walked into an office of a new broadcaster, pitched my idea. He said, great, here's $20,000, not in cash, but your budget is $20,000, go make the film. First of all, today the budgets are the same, and this is 20 years ago, so it's insane. Secondly, that's not how it works anymore. It's a very long process, it's very slow, whatever. Also, in many ways, I have a lot of privilege. For example, I'm not from a working class background. So it's easy for me to tell people, you know what, put your own money into a film. But what if you don't have money, or what if you're worried that if you can't pay rent, you're going to be homeless. So it's almost impossible for me to tell people, do what I do what I did. But more conceptually, because I can't really give practical advice, I think you need to create the circumstances or the industry that you want to work in, rather than joining the mainstream film industry and trying to change it. So if you want to make radical political cinema, form a collective and make radical political cinema with those people and show it in those social spaces. Don't go into the commercial mainstream industry and bang your head against the wall for 10 years trying to make political work. I think it's just as valid to show a film in a community center of 50 people where the film is exactly about their lives than it is to be on the red carpet at the London Film Festival. So it's really about maybe changing our perception of why we make films in the first place.
Done?
Yeah, I don't know if that's advice. That's not really advice.
That's great. No, that's great. That's a good
Okay.
answer. Thank you for your time. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks a lot.
And well, we'll get you again. We'll get you in again maybe in 7 years.
Yeah.
See where you're at.
I think that's a good gap in between our
I think
our episodes.
It's been a minute. So yeah, thank you very much.